right, welcome to On Democracy with FP Wellman. I am FP Wellman, the host of your show. This is the show where we talk about our democracy with really cool people who know what they're talking about. Coming to you from the bright heart center of our nation. Been a little gray lately, but here we are in St. Louis. I can't complain about that. Man, we woke up some fun polls this morning. I'm sure we'll get to discussing that. The presidential race is already, maneuvering has already begun, and all that kind of stuff that goes on in our politics. I thought we wouldn't talk electoral politics, but you can't resist it some days. But our democracy never stops rolling. There's a lot to think about, a lot to talk about. I got an amazing guest who's going to have offer us some perspective that I value and I've known for a little while now. So let's not waste that time. Let's just get the show rolling. On with the show. Welcome. As I mentioned, I am Fred Wellman, your host of On Democracy with FP Wellman, right here everywhere you get your favorite podcast and on the YouTube channel, which I hope you'll subscribe to. There's so much going on right now. I'm so glad to have you here for the show. We got a great guest who there's just no way you don't know him already. If you do, you've been hiding under a rock for a while. But so I don't want to waste the time. He's only giving me so much. I don't want to take all his day. He's a busy man. So Michael Steele is the former Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, chairman of the Republican National Committee. You see him regularly appearing on MSNBC and elsewhere. He now hosts his own podcast, right? Aptly titled The Michael Steele Podcast. and I love the title. You didn't agonize over it. I respect that.
we did research. I spent about $1 million to come up with that name. So
Me too. Yeah. I had a hard time starting my podcast because I got recruited to start my podcast originally. I was like, middle-aged white guy, the podcast is kind of on brand. But here we are. Right? So, we first got connected thanks to the Lincoln Project, I believe, when you shot the ad with my friend Jay Toscano, where you endorsed President Biden, now President Biden, made a lot of people mad in the process. I appreciate you joining me here, and you've been a good mentor and friend to me since then, and I appreciate that. So, I always start the show off with asking folks, all of us are, we're fighting for our democracy in different ways and from different parties and different angles. I always like to ask, you've had a really fascinating career growing up in D.C. You taught for a while. You went into law, Republican politics. You've been a strong voice kind of against what the Republican Party has become from within in the last decade or so. How'd you get here, Michael? What is the journey that led you to this moment where you have your voice?
Well, first off, it's great to see you and to be with you, particularly since your move to the heartland of America. Yes. So really appreciate the time to chat, Fred. So the reality for me is this journey has just been like all journeys, unexpected, twisty, turny, sometimes deliberate, most times not. And the one constant has been my own mooring of my identity and myself, and my value and belief system. I became a Republican in 1976 in Washington, D.C., long before it was cool or accepted to be both Black and Republican. And so I've been in this space a long time, and a lot of the journey for me recently has been sad and frustrating to watch this once proud party become a mere shadow of its former self. That is more animated by white nationalism and hate and racism. And, a lot of my friends on the progressive left especially like to say, oh, it's always been that way. And that's just bull. It's not always been that way. Yeah. And they're, like both political parties have struggled through the challenges that this country has presented it. I mean, to my Dems, I remind them, I said, you guys know you helped found the Ku Klux Klan, right? So, let's keep it all in perspective. Both parties have got stains in this space, but this period for Republicans seems particularly daunting and particularly stain-filled. Yeah. And it's made it very hard for someone like me to fathom what his future looks like, and certainly fathom seeing myself in that future. Yeah. But I still persist as a Motel 6 Republican. Someone's got to keep the lights on. And
I'm going to steal that for him.
Despite the fact that these bastards keep driving by and blowing out the light, but I got more bulbs. I keep putting
graffiti.
It back in.
There's a graffiti in the door. Lib cock.
There's some chicken bones on the porch. Yeah, there were some people here at one time, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not the best part of town these days. Well, that's it, right? I mean, it used to be really nice, but man, the mall's closed. All that's left is the theater and the Cheesecake Factory. It's an apt description, but yeah, I'm an ex-Republican. I'm a Reagan guy, right? I grew up in the 80s and 70s and 80s, and I went to West Point under the Reagan Revolution. The 1983, the buildup, and that was my thing. I was strong on defense and strong on this and strong, and those were our values then. I mean, matter of fact, I've seen, and let's talk about that, and we'll jump around. I've seen a number of pieces this week about Elon Musk being the chief troll, right? And there's been discussions of his politics, right? We're looking at where the conservative movement is today. Greg Sargent said it really well yesterday, because he said, by now it should be obvious that for large swaths of the right-wing media ecosystem, the triggering of the libs has become an end in itself, and those are capitalized. And then as I was preparing for our chat, I looked up your Senate run from 2006 when you focused on, and I quote, low taxes, less government spending, free markets, and national security were your priorities for your Senate run.
That's it.
And I thought, that's real conservatism right there. Wow, 2006. That was
what the hell is that?
Right. And these are not the same anymore. What is the future of the GOP if that's what they've chosen as their cause? Is it owning the libs or triggering? I mean, I think we've really blended what the idea of conservative is, and we've really lost our way on that. You are a rock backed, steel rotted conservative, but
it's
not in your party.
People. Yeah, because, a lot of people, I love moderate Republicans like you. I'm like, okay.
We used to be extremists.
You just stop explaining it. But it tells you just how hard the party has swung to the right, that, traditional conservative comes off as this sort of moderate left-wing Republican.
Right.
I don't know where that would put the liberal Republicans back in the day. They would probably be considered progressives.
I'm that guy. I mean, that guy. I'm that guy. I mean, I asked my ex-wife. I said, when did I become so liberal? She goes, dude, you've always been this way. These are always the values. And as we kind of unpacked my political positions over the years, they're just not part of this party anymore, right? It just, I'm not necessarily sure I've changed.
I mean, and we're both talking about a party that has no platform.
Right.
So it has no way of publicly expressing what it believes,
right,
what it wants to achieve,
right,
how it would govern. Because Donald Trump said, I am all things to you. And the party leadership said, okay.
Right.
And here we are. And so that is the future. So you have all this dancing now around the, Ron DeSantis in Florida. But I keep telling people, Ron DeSantis is Donald Trump in a Brooks Brothers suit, as opposed to, some off the rack, from the guy on the corner. Right.
Still not fitted.
But it's still a suit that doesn't fit the party. And if you want to be about hating transgender children, bashing Disney, burning books and banning books, telling teachers what they can't and can't teach, telling Black people your history is irrelevant and that we will decide what part of that history to tell. If we don't like it, we won't.
Right.
Then that you tell me what kind of future that party has with that kind of, just because it's dressed up. And it may sound bite better, doesn't mean that it is the best thing for the party or the best thing for the country.
And it has a base beyond those folks in Florida.
It has a base beyond those folks, which is why more and more people are leaving the party, which I find ironic, because, they're not talking about the fact that people leaving. They want to say, Black men are now voting Republican. Well, okay, as a percentage of what?
Right. Right.
The people leaving?
Wow. Yeah. Well, did you see the story saying that Herschel Walker's wife was convinced that they would get 50% of the Black vote in Georgia until the very bitter end, until even during ignorance. It's insanity.
That tells you somebody who's disconnected from the Black community.
Right.
Which is, the party oftentimes, relies on those types of individuals who don't have those legitimate street cred, if you will, with the community in a way that brings the community into the narrative. Herschel Walker's brand was the fact that he was a former football player that everyone loves in Georgia. They still love what he did as a player in Georgia and professionally. But that has nothing to do with how he's going to govern as a senator or how he's going to lead as a senator. And when they saw that, they went, "Oh, hell no. We're not. Herschel, you great on the field, but no, the Senate is not your thing." It has nothing to do with the color of his skin and everything to do with his competency.
I think you're right. Does this go to, something I talked about often on the show, if people listen to the show, I do talk about how, like him or hate him, Donald Trump is a lifelong marketer, right? This is a guy who he marketed his celebrity, he marketed his name, he marketed that. You look at today's polling, which is amazing that a Wall Street Journal, I believe even USA Today had another, but Wall Street Journal came out early today with 53% of Republican voters prefer Ron DeSantis over Trump, 38% for Trump. I'm sure the ketchup's flying at Mar-a-Lago right now, but of course, DeSantis is only viewed favorably by 43% of all voters in that sample. So while Trump is a master marketer of Donald Trump, his attempts to create the next Trump, the formula is, celebrity, TV appear, it doesn't seem to work for anybody but Donald Trump, and even Trump doesn't seem to get that, right? And Ron DeSantis is not that guy, right? He's got the bullying part down, right? He's got the woke liberal bullshit, and the agenda, and now I guess anti-vaxxing now, for fuck's sake.
Oh yeah, now he's anti-vaxxing. Yeah, as we play back his quotes talking about how important it is to get vaccinated. Right. But that's the whole thing. This is all performative bullshit, and Americans need to see it for what it is. They're unserious. They're incompetent to do anything beyond scaring people. Now, people may want to talk about the kind of governor that he is in Florida. He got reelected overwhelmingly. Okay, that's fine. That's Florida. Yeah, but that's not the rest of the country. Right. And that doesn't mean that what he's done in Florida is necessarily going to translate on a bigger platform where everything is going to be scrutinized in a national context. And from what I hear from people on the ground in Florida, he does not translate well. He's not that warm, fuzzy guy that Donald Trump was. To your point, Donald Trump was about the personality. Right. Donald Trump had you overlook his deficiencies, to put it that way, because of the outsized nature of his personality and the bold, brash bullshit that would come out of his mouth, which for a lot of folks was refreshing. Oh my God, did you hear what he said today? And they were entertained by that. Right. We have been entertained until it got serious. And all of a sudden you began to see he wants to build a wall. He wants to keep Muslims out. He thinks they're fine people on both sides when it comes to racial attacks and hatred. Yeah. You go through that laundry list. And so when you talk to people, and this is what the polling shows, it's a lot like what we had back in the day among many elected officials and activists. In the life space, when challenged on abortion, they would say, "I'm personally opposed, but." Right. So now you just created this sort of sliding scale, right? The same is here. What do you hear? Oh, I like Donald Trump's policies, but
the policies. I always love that one.
Right. And so of course, I'm just an inquisitive type. Which policy specifically did you like?
Exactly.
And once you get beyond tax cuts that 9 times out of 10 didn't apply or benefit the person who's telling you this, right? It drops off. There is what China. Okay, yeah. So he made a lot of noise about China, but what was the China policy? What was our policy in North Korea? Oh, love letters between him and Kim Jong-un. Right. That was the policy. Yeah. So you're going to find a lot of this kind of playing itself out. I take note of the fact that the guy that everyone's claiming is the second coming of Donald Trump. Right. in a better suit with better coiffed hair, nice looking family, and a very successful governor.
He's a veteran.
Brave
don't
politician.
Forget he's a veteran.
You remember the ad that his wife put out?
Oh my God!
At the end, where on the 8th day, God created Ron DeSantis to bring priests across the land.
Yeah.
Well, this brother can't even tell us what he thought about Donald Trump having lunch and dinner with the Nazis.
Yep.
He has expressed no opinion about that.
Or the Nazis in his state, like Nazis demonstrating on bridges and public places in his own state. He keeps quiet about that.
So here we're on the 9th day, brother. What you gonna say about that? That's what I want to know. So so spare me this second coming bullshit.
Yep.
And let's focus on the fact that until he or anyone else stands up and says Donald Trump is an anathema to everything Republicans used to stand for and should stand for once again. Yeah. And not only am I breaking from this, but I'm moving the party off of this Trump crack. We're going to go through rehabilitation together. We're going to go through the 12 steps of recovery together.
Right.
We're going to make amends to the American people for offending them by saying that January 6th was just political discourse, the election denialism that we spread across the country. We're going to check ourselves now. And I'm going to be the leader to help us do that. Until that happens, bye, Felicia.
Well, that's it. And, it's funny. Another one of our fallen colleagues, Tim Miller, Tim's book was not up here. It should be. I mean, Tim talks about that journey that, and the dopamine of the owning the libs thing, right? And he traces, if you've read his book, he traces the history back to, of course, Rush Limbaugh. And that anger seed that ran through I know you tangled Rush Limbaugh, that it started back then, I know in your early days, and then it goes to today where there's entire ecosystems deriving around that dopamine effect, that we have to get even crazier and have even crazier and even crazier. And then you see, just like that takes us to DeSantis, which again, with his bullshit anti-vax stuff yesterday, and where did he go immediately? He got himself his 5 minutes on Laura Ingraham. It's this cycle of dumping the anger dopamine, but then you're right. It's at some point Americans go, wait a minute, when are you gonna, what's in it for me? What are we gonna govern for? And it's a dangerous cycle. And again, I call myself a democracy advocate, and I worry about the democracy itself. I see the violence. Look, man, I was in Baghdad. I kind of sort of invaded the country twice, and I was there in 2003. I was there in 2005, right in Baghdad. I was in 2008 in Baghdad, ducking rockets from Sadr City. I don't want to fucking live in a country where that's a thing, where people are running around with guns and they hate each other. And we're taking out our enemies, like, we're getting hints of now. It's terrifying. And I think the Elon Musk stuff, which we kind of started talking about at the beginning of this portion of our conversation, is part of that attack. I mean, you talk about the party. I mean, you talked recently about how the Trump wing of the party has taken hold of all the way down to the state parties now, right? And that seals Ronna McDaniel in as the RNC chairman. I'm out here in Missouri. It's clear that no matter what happens to Trump, there is an extremist wing that is taken on. So we talk about the Trump like we just did and the DeSantis, but the same token, we've both talked about recently how that stream, that MAGA stream, the ultra MAGA, what they fucking call themselves now, has trickled down. So many of our state parties, our local parties are run here, even on the local level here where I am in the school district my kids go to, or my girlfriend's kids go to. We had a couple of these anti-masks fucking lunatics and get elected to school board. And the first thing they did was get rid of all the DE&I programs or any program that supported the black students we were busing in from St. Louis City, because it didn't support all students, because, all lives matter. I mean, so how does a party ever recover from, I mean, we talk about getting rid of the, we talked very clearly about we have to get ourselves off the Trump train, but it feels like I'm not necessarily sure that fucking Donald Trump's actually in the engine anymore, right? I mean, back in the caboose, right? So what's happening in the caboose is super terrifying.
That's actually a very, very important point to make, because I think what a lot of people lose sight of at this stage is that this is less and less and less and less about Donald Trump, and more about what Trumpism is now within the political ether of the party. Right. How in that ecosystem, how it's, to your point about the impact at the state level, how that's playing itself out. It's patient zero was Donald Trump. Right. We are beyond patient zero at this point. We've studied it enough. We know the ailments. We know what the signs are. We know what the impact is. So it is less and less and less and less about patient zero, and more about what has now become a widespread infection. That has eaten to the point of rot within the GOP, where don't take my word for it. Y'all can hate me for saying it, but shit, I just look at 2018 and 2020, to special elections in 2021 and 2022.
It's right there.
All I know is in 2010, I won, baby. And I won not by beating the shit out of Barack Obama and saying he was a Muslim and from a foreign country and all this other crap, but by laying before the American people the difference between how we as Republicans saw healthcare and how he was proposing healthcare, how we saw cap and trade, and how they proposed to implement cap and trade, how we saw our global stance in the world, and how they saw our global stance in the world. And the American people were given a choice. And that came off of having to build off of losing cycles in 2006 and 2008, in which we got our clocks thoroughly cleaned because, again, we failed to recognize what the American people were telling us about the war in Iraq, what the American people were saying about the economy, and we paid the price. Here, they failed to realize what the American people have been saying about Trump and Trumpism. And yet we double down with election denialism, embrace of white nationalism, and QAnon, and the American people are like, no, we don't want that. So out of 95 potential statewide elected election deniers being elected, only 9 got elected to state offices. And so it was a rebuke, thorough rebuke. But again, it is not something I have to tell you. I don't need to do a review or an autopsy to know why the party right now is suffering because of its own actions, its own words, and its own leadership. Not because of anything Michael Steele is saying, or not anything that Fred Wellman is saying, or not anything that the Lincoln Project or the Democratic Party, for that matter, is saying, or independent voters. We're just letting you, like you said, when your opponent is out there making a fool of himself, don't join. Just sit back, get some popcorn, and let it happen.
When your enemies make a mistake, let them do it. And that's the thing. I think, it's hard to be optimistic in places like Missouri where it's getting worse, really, to be honest with you. But you also said, the actions of the party. And in many ways, I think they're being judged now, too, by intelligent people on their inactions, right? Which is that weakness, that what makes me sick to my stomach a lot of times is the people like, and I beat this guy up a lot, and I used to like him, but Rob Whitman, who's Virginia 1, for example. Rob was a rock ribbed conservative like you, right? He went toe to toe with Obama on things he didn't agree with him with. He and I used to bat heads even when I was in those early days, and I was kind of floating away in Virginia when I lived in Fredericksburg, Virginia, in his district. He just caved. You know what I mean? He's just disappeared. The Rob Whitman, this traditional Republican, he's a small town guy. That guy just disappeared. And then the next thing I know, I see him showing up at the fucking skiff in Congress with these stupid antics of trying to remember that fucking thing, and I see, and I think that's the other part I think I judge them by is not so much the actions where they've actually, look, I know Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's fucking nut job, right? I mean, I was thinking about, I see her. The problem is the ones I don't see, the ones who've made themselves fucking wallpaper, right? And that's the really scary part is how many of these guys have decided it's the good Nazis, just put the uniform on, but don't worry, I didn't actually throw any Jews. And the person's like, yeah, but you put the uniform on. Yeah, but I wasn't really into it.
I really wasn't into it. Yeah. I left the camp early that day. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that just doesn't, and that's actually a very good point to raise because that's a lot of what you see happening right now.
Right.
It is the, vanilla.
We're done with Trump. We're just so
vegetable
lasagna.
Right. It's like, they want you to believe that they're done with Trump and we need to move off from him. We can't win elections with him. And I'm like, okay, I give you that. That's fine. We only been telling you that since 2015.
Yeah.
But I somehow don't believe it because you gave license to it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
You continued to give license to it even after January 6th.
Yep.
You get to the Senate and the House floor and you condemn the man, and then you get on a plane to Mar-a-Lago to kiss his ass.
You know, we say actions speak louder than words, but I'm also a big believer that inactions speak just as loudly, right? And
very much
hard
so.
To see. And that's what I've seen is we understand everybody talks about, there's only a 30% MAGA wing. Great, but the problem is the other 20 to 30% are sitting there on their hands, not doing a damn thing about it, right?
Right. I mean, where was the pushback to on the 149 members of the House who voted to overturn the election?
Right.
Where was the pushback on Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz running around the country making these wild ass QAnon claims? And there was nothing. There was silence.
Yeah, I call it.
You don't want to deal with that. What? No, okay, you don't have to deal with it, but you're going to deal with the consequences that come from it.
I don't pay attention to Twitter. I'm late for lunch. I call them the late for lunch crowd, Michael. Right? They're the guys that go by the microphone. Oh, sorry, really late for lunch. And you're like, well, fuck. And there's just too many late for lunch guys, who aren't doing a fucking thing. And I think we ignore them at our peril, and they're making a living of, I was helping a candidate here, a wonderful lady named Trish Gumby running in Missouri too against, I remember her name. I want to forget her so bad, but, and her opponent is so vanilla. It's so hard to pin her down. She's just like the Wallpaper Republican. And it's like running, It's like running against a bowl of vanilla ice cream. It's like, well, I'll eat it, but fuck, it's just vanilla. But it's hard to beat those people because they're very good at making themselves, they might as well just fucking vote present. If they're forced to vote, it's present. It's not, they don't stand for anything.
They don't stand for it. And, the test for, the good people of Missouri, like the good people here in Maryland and Florida and elsewhere around the country, is that you got to have a political come to Jesus moment where you realize that the individuals that are putting themselves out there, that you're putting out there, that you ultimately are voting on, they are an extension of you.
Right.
They represent your values and your expectations, even if you didn't vote for them. Right. Yeah. So that's the way our system is. The majority gets to decide. And so the question becomes, do you sit on the sidelines and let the minority become the majority by virtue of your lack of participation? Do you sit on the sidelines and let bad actors be put forth? And this is to McConnell's point about the quality of candidates. Yep. To represent the interest of our party and our national leadership, or do you stand in the breach and say no, right, and get behind candidates who best represent where you think the country and the community and the party should go? So to the point about the national presidential election, there's no differential choice between Donald Trump and DeSantis.
Right.
There's no choice there. I mean, okay, again, I'm voting for an old suit or a new suit.
Yeah. Yeah, neither fit.
But the shit stain on the suit is the same.
Well, and you talk about it. I mean, now we got Marjorie Taylor Greene. As you know, I was senior advisor for her opponent, Marcus Farr, is a dear friend now. I had a year and a half to study her. It's clear that this tiny majority of the GOP, places immense power in this insane form of leadership. I mean, to me, I think it's going to be, where do you see coming? We have a very deeply poisoned House caucus now. The Republican caucus is very poisoned. If McCarthy ends up being speaker, which is amazing that it's not for sure. I think you said he's not, it's.
I was reading something earlier today that says apparently 12 members of the House caucus have come out and said they're not supporting him. So effectively, he's done, which actually, ironically, gives the leverage to the Democrats.
It's going to be insanity, and I think it'll be interesting. So obviously we talked that we know they're going to do the investigations of everything, the impeachments of everybody, and all this ridiculous stuff. With their cheese whiz charcuterie, if you saw that video, right. So I'm going to call it the cheese whiz caucus. So the cheese whiz caucus is going to be causing. It's going to be interesting to me, going back to what we were talking about. Throwing back to those wallpaper Republicans, we'll call them. We're going to spend a lot of time focusing videos, and my friend Ron Filipkowski, who was on the show not too long ago, clips of Marjorie doing her crazy shit, and Gates doing his crazy shit, and Jordan doing his crazy shit. It'll be fascinating to see the guys who are sitting there on the far left, right, Michael, on the podiums there in the committee hearings. How is the wallpaper Republicans going to deal with this? It'll be very interesting to see. I mean, there's an optimist still. I have this weird optimism streak that we joke about here on the show a lot, but will the wallpaper Republicans finally wake up at some point, or what do you see this next 2 years looking like?
They're pretty much going to find themselves with very little choice but to coalesce, create a coalition with center right Democrats. Yeah. And in order to really effectively move anything agenda-wise on any of the committees that they're on. Again, going back to the point I just made, this the report that just came out about an hour ago on the state of the speaker's race, Hakeem Jeffries, the newly minted minority leader, has some weapons in his arsenal now,
and he knows how to use it
to go about and create a coalition that could install the next speaker, because I think it's going to be hard for the hard right to really settle on someone if they're really hell bent against Kevin, and that individual that they do settle on is going to have a hard time garnering the kind of votes and support they need to get to 218. Unless it's someone like a Scalise, who I think could probably bridge that gap, but not for 2 or 3 ballots, maybe. We'll see. But right now, I and a few others have been saying this for months. The idea of Speaker McCarthy was as much a joke today as it was the last 2 times he ran. When there's still that moment to come when Donald Trump weighs in and goes, I don't think he's the best man for the job. And then what, right? Yeah. And I suspect some of that already is what we're seeing playing out now is the result of Donald Trump having quietly signaled that he doesn't want Kevin, because these guys otherwise would not be so brazen as to come out and announce. I mean, like, just the vote they took, the silent vote that they took, or the quiet, whatever they want to call it, but they still leaked out 31 members voted against, didn't they, weren't planning to support him. Now you have 12 who come out and actually said they won't. Yep. It just makes it hard to get to 218. And to your point, it really gives you an indication of what the next 6 to 8 months inside the GOP are going to look like from a legislative perspective. There will be no governing people. So just get that out of your mind now. Yep. We will have hearings on Hunter Biden, but they told us that's what they were going to do. Yep. There are going to be efforts made or attempts to impeach Joe Biden. They told us they were going to do that. They did not tell you they had a solution for healthcare. They did not tell you they had a solution for China. They did not tell you they had a solution for Ukraine, other than we're not writing any more checks. Right. So please, people, let's be realistic about your expectations from this party, because they're telling you what they're not going to do by telling you what they are going to do. Right. Yeah. And it'll translate very directly. Now, I want to throw back to a little, you were chairman of the GOPAC back in the mid 2000s. And that project's been running since 1978. For those not familiar, GOPAC is a Republican project that was born in the 70s when many majorities were held by Democrats, statewide, everywhere. The Democrats had a lock. Tip O'Neill was still there, I think. And a decision was made to launch a program to train, educate, and grow young Republicans, conservative movements across the states, and then
up in the Congress, and by every measure, you have to say it's worked right here in Missouri. When I left Missouri in 1983, it was a Democratic state, but here I am now, and good luck with that, So, it feels like the effort's been wildly successful. I don't know of anything even close on the Democratic side that's competing.
They don't have anything close to GOPAC. I chaired GOPAC between 2007 and 2009. And GOPAC is a state-based operation. It does not do anything at the federal level. It's about grooming, developing, promoting, and placing Republican candidates for state office, statewide and local offices. That's how we grow our base. That's how we grow our bench. And those candidates eventually kind of grow up in the system to run for Congress, the U.S. Senate, governor. Governors would, while they're part of the GOPAC ether, they're also kind of a little bit outside of it because they're the bigger statewide race. So they're almost on par with a federal, kind of race. But nonetheless, we spent a lot of time identifying, grooming those candidates. It is something that the Democrats have missed to their great political peril, which is why it was not easy, but why it made sense for me to target state legislative races in 2010, where we won over 850 seats across the country, flipped 11 state legislatures, because I'm a grassroots guy. I ran GOPAC. I'm like, okay, now we got this farm team. Let's put them out in the field. Let's get them to work. And sure enough, they were ready to assume the roles and responsibilities of state leadership, got elected to state legislatures, to governorships, and other state offices and local offices, county executive, for example, or county commission. So, it is how you grow and operationalize your platform, your values through the kinds of men and women that are representing the party, and putting forth at least a face where people can see a little bit of themselves reflected in it. The Dems talk a lot of that. They just don't do it. They haven't done it. And so now maybe, the lane is there for them to look at creating their version of GOPAC, or at least focusing on these statewide elections. The Democrats did take back, I think, 2 legislatures in this cycle. Michigan being one of them. Which is a big deal. To take both the House and the Senate in Michigan. But that's 1 of 50. And if you want to know how we were able to land and have success with Supreme Court nominations and federal appointments and things like that, it all began with what we were doing at the state and local level.
It's a long-term project, right? It feels like there's a certain point of self-sustainment as well. Right? Like I said, being here in Missouri, it's sort of there. Once you add enough fuel to the fire just burns, right? And I do see that here in Missouri. It's been unique for me to go from Virginia back to my hometown. When I left Missouri in 1983, this is not what Missouri looked like. Hell, when I left Georgia, I was, I don't, if you know, I ran briefly for mayor of Peachtree City, Georgia in 2001, and they threw a war, so I went off to war instead. But funny thing, throw a war.
It is better to be in Iraq.
It's true. I've said that before. Actually, I'm better off being in Iraq than in local politics. But having said that, I remember the funny thing about that is this is how long ago this was. And you look what happened in Georgia. They won all the statewide races, Republicans, except for Senate. When I ran for mayor, our state rep from Peachtree City, Fayette County, which is just west of Atlanta, went up to get one of our road intersections fixed with the governor. I believe it doesn't matter which governor it was. And it may have been Sonny Perdue, but I'm not sure. Anyway, so you go see the governor, and after they get done their presentation about this intersection, as they're leaving the room, and this is 2000, he goes, "Hey, one thing, y'all got a lot of Republicans down there, don't you?" And they're like, "Well, yes, sir." He goes, "Okay, great. Well, good talking to you." And now literally the entire state's dominant. The Republican Party is taking that state. So in a 20-year effort, Georgia's gone. You'd be hard pressed to argue that Georgia's a purple state, except for some major movement, and it's close. But so that it becomes sort of a self-sustaining thing, and that's something I've talked about on the show before. Is I don't know if you know this probably, but it translates higher up in this cycle. 23 Republican congressional candidates ran unopposed, and only 6 Democrats. And so I think that is the translation, to include, by God, Paul Gosar and Debbie Lesko in Arizona ran unopposed. I mean, just wrap your head around that for a second, that Paul Gosar
it's how you take seriously the idea of actually engaging in the hard knock aspects of partisan politics. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that you've got to be brutal and it's dirty, it's ugly, it's a little bit of that. But you don't have to engage where it's zero sum, where I hate you, you hate me, and think that you're going to have success in that space. I think what you have to do, you still have to do the basic work of convincing voters that your team is better prepared to lead than that team, right, that your ideas are going to benefit them more. What happened in this cycle, one of the things that ate into the red wave was that voters, while they were disappointed or did not like or outright rejected some or all of what the Biden administration was saying or doing or had accomplished on policy, there were other things that mitigated against the Republicans, whereas those concerns would have been preeminent, right? Because it's all about the economy, right? Oh, inflation is up and gas prices are up. Oh, we win. No, because you have candidates out here who are telling us that they're pro-life, but they're paying for their girlfriend's abortions. You have candidates out here who are telling us that if you elect me, I will relitigate the 2020 election cycle. And in fact, I will throw out the results and declare Donald Trump the winner. So voters are like, that's more of a threat to me than the price of gas, right? Mm-hmm. That's more of a threat to the future for my kids than the level of inflation. Yep. Inflation will rise and fall. The democracy, once it falls, does not rise again, at least not easily, and certainly not within your lifetime. And so I think a lot of voters weighed that. And to the point on that, Fred, what we saw in some of the national polling, which was probably the most accurate in this cycle than it has been in a while, was at the beginning of the summer, the number 8, 9, 10 issue for voters was democracy.
Yep.
On the weekend before the election, the last poll taken by New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, NBC poll, democracy was the number 1 issue. So that tells you that voters had been paying attention to January 6th. They were paying attention to the Mar-a-Lago investigation. They were paying attention to all of it, and they had formed an opinion on it.
Yeah.
And that opinion was, democracy still matters to me.
Yep. And
I think for candidates going into this upcoming cycle, they cannot discount that.
Yeah.
They cannot discount that. So
I agree on all points, and it does matter, and the corruption does matter, the criminality does matter, and does pay off, and eventually, look, it's just there's so much, there's just the volume of it has got to stick at some point. So, and again, it'll be interesting to see what it does to those wallpaper Republicans, and we'll have to keep an eye on those who are desperately trying to stay out of our view. You know what I mean? Yeah, nothing to see here. I'm late for lunch. So the late for lunch crowd.
With the wall.
I mean, they're not going to. I look forward. I mean, I've told people a lot of that. You're not going to be able to hide anymore when you are the majority, by the way, and you're having to send these committees next to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Boebert and all the crazies. Good luck trying to blend in, because we're going to see you, and seeing you is going to be key, and we're going to hold you accountable for your misbehaviors.
Yeah. Well, the holding accountable is an essential part of it, for sure.
Yeah, well, I can't thank you enough for joining us on the show. So it's always fun talking to you. I mean, everybody loves watching.
Same here, man.
I really
enjoyed it very much.
So where do we find the new podcast? Where do we find you online? What project you got cooking right now?
The Michael Steele Project, which a podcast, which I spent over $1 million to come up with that name. No, I didn't, people, just say that. But the Michael Steele Podcast, you can certainly find on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm on Twitter at Michael Steele. Certainly Instagram, Chairman_Steele there.
Yep.
And TikTok. I don't have a presence on TikTok. I'm just addicted to it.
I know. I know I'm not supposed to. I know I'm supposed to get off it, but
last night I get in the bed and I'm lying there and, I'm setting just, let me check my calendar so I have to see what I have to do tomorrow morning when I get up. And I checked it and then this TikTok thing just popped in. I said, oh, an hour and a half later.
Yep. Yeah, you get
I'm done.
Yep.
I'm just done. I won't even begin to tell you the language my wife was using at that point. But but no, seriously, the Michael Steele podcast, which is a fun podcast. Love to get you on.
I'd love
to have you do a little promo as well as conversation with my listeners and certainly, MSNBC, I'm there.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. We see on TV too. As if you didn't say that, I was going to say, you see him on TV too.
MSNBC is a political analyst quite a bit, which is fun. I'm just trying to keep it real and honest. And, as my friends who know me will say, I'm the same guy from 1976 today, meaning that, my views on some issues may have changed, but my consistency about the value and the proposition of Republican ideals, Lincoln Republicanism is what I call it. It's why I define myself as a Lincoln Republican, still matter the most to me. I mean, Lincoln is why I'm a Republican.
Yeah.
And that for me says it all, not Donald Trump. And as much as I admired Ronald Reagan, not Ronald Reagan, it was what this party was originally founded on, that I still think has some value for the American people, and try to make that case either inside the party or outside of it.
I agree. That's it. That the values that we hold, and it's what I say often. I actually tweeted it just not long ago. It's like my values haven't changed. In many ways, I'm sticking to them more than I ever have in my adult life.
Right. Because you realize how valuable they are.
Right. I think I bent my values for a long time there to fit myself into someplace I wasn't welcome. And now I'm like, no, I've sprung them back. It's like, no, this is what I stand for. This racism will not stand. This bigotry, this homophobia, letting people live their lives. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. This is not what I stand for.
Yeah.
So it's
I think that's very, very true.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your journey in that struggle, my friend.
Well, I appreciate you too. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. I think we'll let you go, and we'll see you soon, sir. Wow, what a great conversation with Michael Steele. As you can see, he's a no BS guy like me. That's why this is an R-rated show, I think. we tell it like it is here at On Democracy, and I'm glad you enjoyed the show. As always, you can find me online at FP Wellman on Twitter. I'm on post.news if you got on Post yet. If you can line up for Post, I'd love to see you on Post. Of course, I'm on YouTube. I'm everywhere. Our program on YouTube is On Democracy Podcast. We'd love you to follow us there. Subscribe, like, review. We desperately need reviews on Apple Podcasts so people will see our podcast. We desperately need to subscribe in all those places so you get the podcast as soon as it comes out. Any support you can give us is appreciated. And always follow me and DM me and reach out to me if you can. As always, the show is sponsored by our friends at Vi Media. Vi Media is your digital marketing partner. They're based right here in St. Louis. They can take care of all of your needs in digital marketing. They're very good at what they do. They've been a great friend and partner to the show. You can find them at vi.media online. That's VIE.media. In the meantime, you can find us right here on the show on YouTube and everywhere. We'll be back again next week on time with a great guest, a wonderful, smart person, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who's written the book Strong Men. You'll see here in the far right. Hey, man, if you follow us on social media this week, I'll talk a little bit about the books we've got here and why I chose them. In the meantime, have a great week. Hope you're getting ready for the holidays and you're enjoying your family time. We'll be soon. In the meantime, we'll see you next week on Democracy with FP Wellman.